Hey guys, in this video, I want to review the Rupes iBrid Nano Short Neck 1-inch polisher. What's going on guys? Luke here with Wilson Auto Detailing. I'm a pro detailer based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Now, for those of you who are doing a lot of paint correction, you may have seen this tool in a lot of different contexts, and you see that there's a long neck version and a short neck version, and you're wondering, with the high price point of this tool, is it worth it? Which one should I buy? And can I see it in action? Well, the first thing I want to do is just give you guys a really good look at the tool. You can see that on the body of the tool, you have the lever that's actually sitting on the back. In other words, when I take my hand and I kind of press that lever down, that is what causes the machine to actually start running. You've got a 1 to 5 speed setting, and the top part looks like kind of a steel material to me. The body is plastic, extremely good construction. You can see that on the bottom of the tool, you have a removable battery, so this could be used cordless. And the kit that I purchased here actually comes with 2 different batteries, but you also have a corded option where you can actually stick the corded piece into the back of it, plug the other piece into an outlet, and you could use this for days on end. It's never gonna die. Now, in addition to that, at the head of the tool, you have a backing plate. What I have on here is a 3mm backing plate. This is generally what I like to use for wet sanding. The 3mm just refers to the throw of the backing plate. In other words, how much from the center is it going to throw out? So if you think about it like this, the larger the millimeter throw, the more space you're gonna cover when you're holding the polisher in one still spot. The smaller that millimeter throw, the smaller the coverage you're going to attack. So when I'm wet sanding, I like to have a little bit smaller coverage. It comes with a 3mm and a 12mm attachment. It's extremely easy to switch out. I'll actually switch these out for you at the end of the video so you can see exactly how to do it. But without any further ado, let's just go ahead and use the tool so that you can see it in action. Now I'm gonna tape off an area here that I'm gonna wet sand and show you guys not only how the tool works in just classic polishing, but we're gonna be sanding away some of these scratches. Now I'm gonna take my pen light to this so that you guys can see all the imperfections. You can see the scratch that's running right there. You can see a scratch up here that's running like this, right there. And then of course there are swirls everywhere, and there's a scratch right there, scratch right there, a scratch right there. So there's a lot of surface level scratches here. So we're gonna sand this with 2000, then 3000, then polish it out, all with the iBrid Nano polisher. Now I'm gonna start with a 2000 grit pad here. This is a foam backed pad. It's actually called the X cutting pads from Rupes. And it's just foam back sanding discs. And I actually just cut out basically 1 inch in diameter or a little bit more of the pad so that I can fit it on the end of the polisher here. And there's actually a specific tool I'll hook up in the YouTube description box below that can punch out pads. I'll show it on another YouTube video. But I wanna go ahead and get into talking about the polisher as I'm actually using it. So I'm gonna set my polisher speed to about a 3 here. And then once again, as I lay my hand down on the trigger, it's gonna start. So what I'm gonna sand is just a little bit of a rectangle right here on the right side of the tape. And we're gonna talk through this as my polisher starts at about a speed 2.5 to 3. Now the first thing I want you guys to see is that I actually have 2 hands on the polisher. I've got one hand obviously on the trigger right here, holding it on the body. Then I got another hand on the left side, my left hand pushing it to the side. And then when I come back here, I'm gonna let up on my pressure. I'm gonna come back this way. For whatever reason, even though this could be used with one hand, I could literally wet sand with one hand like this. I just like to have 2 hands on the polisher at any given time because it does kind of give me a little bit of a sense of control. Another place I like to put my hand when I'm polishing is right here on the back. So I'll just kind of take my fingers, lay them very lightly on the back. And it just once again helps me guide the sanding disc or the polishing pad that I'm using. So I'm just gonna be going kind of horizontal lines here. Now the second thing I want you guys to see is that I'm not putting any pressure on the tool, and the tool backing plate is not stalling at all, so I'm on about a 3 speed, let's call it. The third thing that I want to mention here is how kind of like ergonomically friendly this tool is. So it feels really, really good to use when you're just holding it in your hands. And in addition to that, the lever that sits on the back that I'm pressing down to turn the machine on, it's really, really nice actually, especially for a tool that's kind of like this shape and it's used for these small areas. It's really easy just to kind of lay your hand down without any sort of death grip and start to use it. Now, I want to be quiet for just a second so that you guys can kind of just hear the machine, and I've got my lapel mic on. So just listen to kind of how quiet this is when I'm working. Relative to your average DA polisher, 6-inch backing plate, 5-inch backing plate, this is just a lot quieter. Now, in addition to that, you guys can see how the backing plate is actually ever so slightly angled about this way. So it makes a ton of sense because as I'm using it on the paint, if it was facing straight kind of parallel to the paint, I would have to be holding the body of the machine down like this, and it would be a lot harder to maneuver. Because it's angled a little bit like this, I'm able to hold the back of the machine up, have the pad flat on the paint. So really, no matter where I'm touching the paint, it kind of fits perfectly. Now, some of you might be wondering, why did you get the short neck rather than the long neck? Because the long neck is actually the most popular polisher out of these two. The reality is, I like to control things in my paint correction, wet sanding world. A short neck gives me a little bit less weight on the top, and it gives me a little bit less surface area to control. When I'm using the short neck, it's much easier for me to control. Now, I'm gonna keep going here, and then I'm gonna introduce a 3000 grit sanding disc. And I'm not trying to get this area perfect. I'm actually just doing this to kind of showcase the polisher itself. So we'll spend a little bit more time wet sanding this lower area. And then I'm gonna go ahead and wipe it off, and we're gonna switch pads. So we're gonna stop right about there. I'm gonna switch pads here, going to my 3000 grit disc here that I also just punched out of a larger pad. Now I'm gonna wipe off the leftover clear coat here. I'm gonna leave it a little wet just because I'm gonna come in with a 3000 grit. The reason why I'm upgrading to a 3000 grit is just because it's gonna ensure that I don't get any pigtails or any kind of leftover hazing or anything like that when I come to polish it. So I'm gonna go ahead and come back in. I'm gonna put this on a 3 setting here. So this little tool is literally perfect. A small tool like this is kind of the beginner wet sander's friend because it allows you to get that machine uniformity of sanding marks when you're doing it. When you're doing it by hand, a lot of times it's easy to get a lot of uneven pressure, stuff like that. So if you don't have specific instruction, I don't necessarily suggest wet sanding by hand. When you are machine wet sanding, a small little polisher like this really gives you a lot of room to not know really what you're doing and still get fantastic results. Now I'm gonna go ahead and wipe this off, and I'll bring you guys in just so you can see what the sanded area looks like here after the 3000 grit. So I'll give you kind of a pulled back view here. Now you can see obviously this edge right here is super uneven because we didn't tape it off. We're not going to a specific area. So this is ready to be polished. I'm gonna go ahead and put a polishing pad on the 1-inch backing plate, and we'll talk through it. Now I'm just gonna be putting one of the Rupes Blue medium cut foam pads, or maybe this is a heavy cut foam pad, I'm not sure. It comes in the kit, and I'm actually gonna be using my own polish here. I'm not gonna be using theirs. This is the polish that I like to use from CSI, and I'm just gonna use a tiny little drop right in the center there. One of the things that I want you guys to note is that I would actually in real time be using probably my 3-inch polisher to take care of an area this large, but I am going to just be using this because we're talking about the polisher. I'm gonna start it at about a speed 3 to 4. I'm gonna add just a spritz of water there. This is actually a water soluble polish, so this is gonna give it a little bit more substance to move around in here. So I've covered the whole area. Now what I want you guys to see is that as I've got this on about a speed 3 here, I'm gonna keep my left hand kind of on top of the polisher to keep pressure because this medium cut foam pad will tend to kind of bump you out from the paint. And I want you guys to just look at the backing plate. As I keep it flat and put a little bit of pressure, and I'm on about a 3 to 3.5 speed, I'm not getting any stalling from the pad really. Now when I come up to this body line here and I kind of lose my evenness or holding it parallel to the paint, I get a little bit of stalling, and I can kick up the speed just to compensate for my own user error if I want to, or I can just be real cognizant of it, and I can go ahead and sit here getting no stalling whatsoever. So I want you guys to see that here. This backing plate is moving across the paint really well. Now the reason why I said I would reach for my 3-inch in a situation like this is just because with a 1-inch backing plate, even this small area is enough to create like more work for yourself, and you really don't need to spend that much time on this area. I'm gonna kick the speed up just a little bit here because I'm putting a little bit more pressure on the paint, and I wanna make sure this backing plate is not going to be stalling. So I'm kicking it up all the way to 5. I'm leaning into it just a little bit, and generally I would be using a microfiber pad, but I don't have a small one handy, so I just went ahead and reached for this one. Now the other thing worth noting is that I've got the 3mm adapter on this, and so generally speaking, when I move to polishing, I would put the 12mm adapter on this because it's gonna lend itself a little bit more to the polishing work I'm doing here and allow me to get through a little bit more work a little bit quicker. But the main takeaway here that I want you guys to see is just how easy the polisher is to use and how handy it is when you're in these tighter scenarios where you need something a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my microfiber towel, wipe all of this off just so that we can get a good look at what the paint looks like here. And what I'm expecting to see is some paint that is not fully corrected in terms of the scratches, but probably most of the swirls are gone. And the paint at this point is probably relatively dull as well because we didn't spend any time finishing it out. We just spent some time removing kind of the bulk of the sanding marks here. So I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here. Here, of course, is the sanded area that's not been polished. And then here is the area where we've got still some hazing. And of course, there's a lot of hazing next to the tape because we didn't bring the polisher too close there. And then you've got some of the scratches left over as well. If you look at the top and bottom of the bulb of the light, you'll see all of that hazing. What we want to do is just try to take care of that with some finishing polish. Now, full disclosure, this is also another reason why I wouldn't necessarily use this polisher with an area that's this large, even though it is relatively small. I'd use something like a 3-inch polisher because you will be able to naturally get a little bit more aggressive correction done when you've got a bit of a bigger machine. It is a little bit more powerful. You're not going to stall quite as easily, and you can kind of work your technician skill into the situation where the polisher is going to stall relatively quickly if I put any pressure down because it's just a smaller backing plate. It's a smaller machine. And so what I'm expecting when we use some finishing polish here is actually not to get rid of all the hazing. I'd probably need to break out a little bit bigger polisher to do that, but we'll see what happens anyways. So I'm going to go ahead and take my finishing polish and just spread it around just like this. And then we'll kind of talk through this last stage here. I'm gonna keep it on about a speed 4. And I'm gonna zoom you guys in a little tighter here so that you get another just close up of what this looks like. Left hand coming here on the polisher. And we're gonna keep it at this speed basically the whole time. Now, I'm not really gonna be putting any pressure on the paint here, but I wanna give you guys a few other areas that this particular tool comes in handy that you might not be thinking about. Number one, of course, when you're identifying specific scratches on the paint that you're going after with a sort of wet sanding technique, this is going to be a tool that I reach for basically 100% of the time. Secondly, if I'm restoring black trim around the windows that is particularly smooth, so it's not so porous, but you've got that black trim and kind of rubber sealing around the windows that is very thin and very difficult to correct if you don't have a polisher like this, that's where this comes in handy. You're able to get in those really, really, really tight areas. In addition to that, things like headlights, front bumpers, front grills, when you're correcting those areas, especially when you're getting super detailed, this polisher is gonna fit in those areas basically perfectly, okay? Now, the other thing that I wanna comment on is the battery life here. I would say that I've been using the polisher for a total runtime now of 15-ish minutes, and the battery is on low. And so you probably got 15 to 25 minutes depending on how aggressively you're using the tool with each of these batteries. But the particular kit comes with 2 batteries that I purchased, and so it's easy to let one charge up while you're using the other. And like I said, you've got the corded option as well. Now I'm gonna pull the polish off, and I bet you my prediction was right about just the general haze that we're probably gonna be picking up on here in the paint. So here, of course, is the unfinished area. It's the sanded area that we really didn't do anything to. And then here is the area that we just finished with that finishing polish. You can see the scratch right there. The second thing is this paint in the camera looks pretty good, but there's still a little bit of hazing that you can't quite pick up on the camera. It's a little bit easier to see in real life. There's some sanding marks here. The reason for that is because I reached for these 2 foam pads because they are fit to the particular backing plate that I'm using. Generally speaking, I'd grab a microfiber and a larger polisher to just go ahead and correct this pretty quickly. But again, for the sake of just reviewing the iBrid Nano polisher, that's what it feels like. That's what it looks like when it's in motion. And these are the kind of areas and situations that I would reach for a tool like this in. Now, if you do end up getting this machine, I do want to show you how to change out the backing plates because I actually think this is a pretty important thing to know how to do. In the kit, it comes with a little carrying case here. And what you've got are different backing plates as well as different adapters. So I want to show you, this is the 12mm throw adapter. So this is what I would put on if I was doing some just basic polishing. This green, really tiny piece here is the rotary adapter. And then the one that I have on here is the 3mm adapter. Now in the kit, you've got this little tool that has these teeth on either end of it. And on the smaller end, you kind of have this wrench looking thing. And so what I can do here is stick this around the 3mm blue adapter. So right here, it's a red adapter, but basically this just holds it in place. And then I can spin the the backing plate off of it if I turn it counterclockwise. Again, just spun this off by holding it in place here. Now, in order for me to take out this 3mm adapter here, all I want to do is press this button on the back of the steel head because it's going to lock this thing in place. So I'm going to click that down, and then I'm going to take the other side with the larger teeth on this tool, and as I push the button down in the back, I'm going to use this tool to basically just leverage my way, spinning this out of the machine, loosening it just like that. And then once I kind of knocked it loose, I can kind of use my finger to get it out here. And there we go. So I just spun it out, okay? And you guys can see that with each of these adapters, again, you've got this blue that indicates this is the 3mm, and then this is the area that screws into the machine. This back area is just a classic screw. The same is true of the 12mm adapter. You've got just this classic male end here. And then this is where you screw in the backing plate, but this particular one is 12mm in throw. This is 3mm in throw. Then of course you have the rotary, which obviously just looks like this. There's no counterweight, there's no counterbalance to it because it's just spinning in one single direction. And so using the rotary is actually probably the easiest way to show you how to do this. But again, when you look inside the machine, what you see is that you've got a little hole right there that fits any of these adapters. So I take the male end here and I screw it into the back of the machine. So I'll show you how I do that here. And then with the rotary piece, I can once again click the back, lock it in, and then tighten it by hand, or even take this because it kind of is a wrench in some ways and tighten it up just a little bit. What I've got is my adapter screwed in. I can take any backing plate that I want and screw it straight into that adapter, even just tightening this by hand if I want to. And I'm ready to take any of my pads, put them on the back. If I stick my battery in here, I've now got a rotary spin on my machine. That's how you change out these adapters. So guys, there you go. It's a quick review of the short neck Ibrid Nano Polisher from Rupes. Really good tool. If you're wondering, do I need to purchase this tool today or can I wait? The point at which I would say a tool like this becomes necessary is when you are doing a significant amount of paint correction, because the amount of time that you're gonna save by having a tool like this is going to eventually outweigh the fact that you have to pay over $600 to purchase it. So it is a relatively expensive tool, but again, when you're doing as much paint correction as we do here, this ends up saving you a ton of time because you can just reach really quickly for it. It's uncorded, it's ready to go. I just pop the battery in and I'm ready to polish a small area. Then I pick up my 6" again and I go to the larger area that I'm working on. So having a different tool for those tighter areas makes a ton of sense. And when you're doing some wet sanding, scratch removal, even headlight restoration, a tool like this comes seriously in handy for obvious reasons. So it's something I highly suggest, but it's something I really only suggest the professional who's doing a significant amount of correction actually purchase. Now, as always, I will hook up everything I used in this video in the YouTube description box below. But for those of you who are watching this and you're like, man, I'm tired of looking at all the expensive paint correction tools. I want to get into paint correction, but I don't really know how. I want to get into ceramic coatings, but I don't have all the money to do that, or maybe the skill set to do that. I actually have a free 6-part video series that I'm going to link up in the YouTube description box as well. I call it the Ceramic Coating Quick Start series. It's basically a system that gives you all of the hands-on training you need from prep, paint correction to actually coating. And then the last 3 videos are designed to make you your first several $100s with ceramic coatings by closing your first customer and teaching you a rinse and repeat system to actually monetize your newfound skill set. And I don't think anybody else is really laying it out as clearly as is laid out in that series. And it's totally free to you. So I'll hook that up in the YouTube description box below as well. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, from Luke here at Wilson Auto Detailing, keep working hard, and I will see you in the next video.